Have you ever been the one left behind, the sister?
Are you sure
the
about
friend,
this?
the quiet soul no one chose
I
first?
have to go.
Imagine living a life where your worth is measured not by your heart, but by how you look, how softly you speak, or how much you please others. That was Clara Whitlow's life, until one fateful morning when her father made a choice that would change everything. Her beautiful sister refused a marriage to a man she'd never met, and Clara was sent in her place across the wild Montana frontier to marry a stranger who had never seen her face. What would you have done? Would you walk away
It's been
from
a long
lie,
journey.
or step into it to protect your family's
But we
honor,
made it together.
knowing it could cost you your happiness forever? In the untamed West, where storms could break a man's will and love was as rare as spring rain,
I cannot stay here any
Clara
longer.
had to find her
Vanessa,
courage, her
But
truth,
where will you go?
and
It
maybe
is not safe out
a
there.
love that saw beyond appearances. Stay with us as we uncover a story of resilience, forgiveness, and the kind of love that chooses you when the world never did. And if you believe in second chances, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Frontier Hearts before we begin. Morning light slid under a low bank of clouds and ran like pale gold across the Dakota plains, catching the clapboard of the Whitlow farmhouse until it seemed to glow. In the upstairs room, Clara Whitlow rested her brow against the cool window pane and studied the wide, empty sweep of prairie. At 24, she had made peace with the lot everyone assigned her. The steady daughter with work-roughened hands and dresses
Are you
worn
sure
thin
about
by
this?
kitchens and fields. At
I have to
dances
go.
and church socials, eyes never lingered on her. Those looks belonged to Lila, younger by a year and polished like a prize apple, the favorite of every gathering. Clara was the one people relied on to fetch, carry, mend, and make do. Her father's command rose from downstairs, sharp enough to sting. Clara smoothed her faded calico and went down, each tread heavier than the last. The kitchen felt colder than the morning. Her mother sat tight-lipped, fingers laced hard. Her father stood near the stove, jaw like iron. Lila was there too, pale and exquisite, even while dabbing at tears with a lace handkerchief, blue eyes bright, hair like spun sunlight. "Tell her," Henry Whitlow said, voice stripped of any softness. Lila lifted her gaze, mouth trembling. "I cannot marry that man. A rancher in Montana Territory, likely sleeping under a leaky roof in the back country. I will not go." Clara's stomach turned. She knew about the letters. Lila had been corresponding for months with a rancher named Luke Carver, and the house had all but celebrated when money for Lila's passage arrived. A decent match, one less mouth to worry over. "You gave your word," their mother said, though her eyes were damp with pity for the youngest. "I did not understand what I agreed to," Lila cried. "Besides, Edwin Carter has been calling. He owns the general store. I could stay near home, near family." "Enough," Henry snapped, fist landing on the table. "You took that man's money. Our name is at stake." Then Lila spoke the line that shifted the ground under Clara's feet, then let Clara go. Silence filled the room. Clara stood rooted, heart hammering. What? She managed. Lila's tears settled into a calm that looked practiced. "Mr. Carver has never met me. He has only seen a photograph where you can barely tell who is who. Clara can go in my place. She is better suited to that sort of life. Better suited because no one ever chose her. Because she was the one who stayed behind and kept the house running while other people smiled for the world." "That is dishonest," Clara said, voice unsteady. "Is it?" Henry answered, eyes narrowed and calculating. "You are both Whitlow daughters. He asked for a bride. He will get a bride. And what do you expect here? Clara, you think any fellow looks twice at you when Lila walks into a room." The truth bit deep. For years, Clara had watched partners cross the floor to her sister while she refilled cups and scrubbed cups after. "I will not lie to him," she said. "Then tell him the truth when you arrive." Her father replied with a shrug. "Let him decide. But you will go. We will keep our word." The verdict fell like a gavel. 2 mornings later, she stood at the coachyard with a small trunk that held mended dresses, her mother's Bible, and a few jars put up the previous fall. Henry's grip on her arm was stern, as he warned her not to bring shame on the family. Her mother slipped a peppermint into her palm and would not quite meet her eyes. Lila stayed off to one side in a fine blue coat, unruffled and perfect, relief flickering in her expression when their glances met. "All aboard." The driver called. Clara climbed into the stage with her bundle tight to her belly. As the wheels clattered over the first ruts and the house fell away, she looked back. Her father had already turned. Only her mother lifted a hand. The road west bucked and jolted. They stopped at lonely stations where the fare was tough beef and hard biscuits that sat like stones. Dakota farmland thinned into a sea of grass and then broke against the shadow of mountains. Clara's back ached. Dress dust gritted at her throat, but she bore it in quiet. A traveling minister lent her newspapers and soft words now and then. Across the aisle, a stout woman complained about everything earth and sky had to offer.
It's been
Clara's
a long
thoughts
journey.
kept slipping to the man in Montana who believed
we
a
made
different
it
sister was
together.
on her way. She read the letters again by lantern light. Luke Carver, 31, war veteran, a rancher who built his place with his hands. Plain words, but the shape of them told on him. He wanted a partner for rough seasons, someone sturdy enough to stand the wind and still make a home. Those pages were meant for Lila. What would he think when Clara stepped off instead? By late day, the coach rolled into Bozeman. Through the dusty window, she saw men in black hats, women shepherding children, shopkeepers brisk in pressed coats. "End of the line, miss," the driver said. Clara climbed down, boots hitting packed earth. The Montana wind tugged at her bonnet and lifted the grit from the street. She gathered her trunk in both hands and drew a steady breath. The taste of new country
It's
sharp
been a
on
long
her tongue.
journey.
"Miss Whitlow."
But we
The
made
voice
it
came
together.
deep and steady, cutting through the sounds of the bustling depot. Clara turned and found herself staring at a man who seemed carved from the very land around him. Luke Carver stood tall, shoulders broad beneath a black coat dusted from the trail, his hat shadowing a face tanned by sun and shaped by years of hard work. His eyes, a cool gray, studied her with quiet confusion. Clara began, her throat dry. "Mr. Carver, I'm Clara Whitlow, Lila's sister." He didn't speak, only waited, the muscles in his jaw still. "There's something you should know," she continued, her hands tightening on the handle of her small trunk. "Lila isn't coming. My father sent me in her place." Luke's brow furrowed. "Your sister isn't coming." Shame heated her cheeks. "No, I know this isn't what you expected. You were promised Lila, not me. I told them it wasn't right, but they wouldn't listen. I came to tell you the truth." She drew in a shaky breath. "If you want to send me back, I'll understand." For a long moment, he said nothing. The wind lifted the brim of his hat and sent dust swirling around their boots. His gaze stayed steady on her face, unreadable, but not cruel. Finally, he spoke in a low tone. "You traveled 5 days alone." "Yes," she answered softly, "through half-wild country. I came to honor my family's word and to give you the choice that was taken from you." Something changed in his expression, though only slightly a flicker, like light moving behind clouds. Then he nodded toward a wagon waiting nearby. "My wagon's this way. You'll stay at the ranch
I
tonight.
cannot stay here any longer.
We'll talk
Going
more
to
in the
hang.
morning."
But where will you
He
go?
lifted her trunk with one
is not
hand
safe out
as though
there.
it weighed nothing. Clara followed him, her heart unsteady, each step into the unknown heavier than the last. Whatever tomorrow brought, she reminded herself, at least she had told the truth, and the truth had to count for something. The wagon jolted along a rutted road, leaving the noise of bowsmen behind. The prairie opened around them in rolling waves, the night air sharp with pine and dust. Overhead, stars spilled across the dark sky, brighter and more countless than Clara had ever seen in Dakota. Beside her, Luke held the reins with the calm confidence of a man who had long made peace with silence. Every so often, he clicked his tongue to the horses, but said little else. Clara clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the quiet stretch between them like a living thing. She wanted to ask what he thought of her, what would happen now, but her courage stopped short. "How old are you?" he asked at last. 24. "Why aren't you married?" The bluntness stung, though his tone was not unkind. Clara kept her chin up. "Because men don't look at me when my sister is in the room." For a time, only the creak of the wheels answered them. Then Luke said quietly, "But you still came." "I came to tell you the truth," she replied, her voice steadier now, "and to let you decide what to do with it." He didn't answer, but she thought she saw his jaw tighten again, a small sign that her words had struck somewhere deep. When they reached the ranch, the moon hung high, white as bone over the dark hills. Clara's breath caught as she took in the sight before her. The house stood 2 stories tall, sturdy and square, with windows glowing warm against the night. A barn loomed nearby, and fences stretched toward the mountains that rose like sentinels in the distance. It wasn't a shack, it was a home, built by sweat and steady hands. Luke helped her down from the wagon. His touch was firm, but distant. "I'll bring your trunk inside. The guest room's upstairs, inside." The house was plain, but carefully kept. A stone fireplace glowed low, the scent of pine smoke and stew filling the air. Wooden furniture stood polished from years of use. Clara noticed the small Bible on the side table and a rocking chair by the window, both signs of solitude. Luke served her stew from a pot simmering on the stove. "Eat," he said simply. Clara obeyed, the flavor richer than anything she'd tasted since she left home. Luke sat across from her, his gaze unreadable. "Can you cook?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "And keep house. 10 livestock. Mend clothes. I was raised on a farm. I can manage most things that need doing." He studied her for a moment longer before speaking again. "You didn't deceive me," he said finally. "Your family did. Your sister did. Not you." Relief pricked her eyes, though she blinked it away. She had braced for anger or dismissal, but his tone was even, his words deliberate. When the meal was done,
Are you sure about this?
Luke carried her trunk upstairs without
I have
another
to go.
word. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said quietly. "Get some rest, alone in the small room." Clara lay awake beneath the quilt, listening to coyotes call somewhere out beyond the hills. Tomorrow, she thought, he would decide her fate, whether she stayed or went home in disgrace. The morning came cold and bright, the kind of morning that seemed to scrub the sky clean. Clara rose early, her body moving through old, familiar motions, lighting the stove, mixing dough, frying bacon until the smell filled the kitchen. When Luke stepped through the door from the barn, his boots heavy with frost, the table was already set. He paused in the doorway, clearly surprised. "You didn't have to do this. I'm used to being useful," she said simply, placing a plate before him. They ate without much talk, but the silence no longer pressed so heavily between them. Luke's gaze lingered on her not in admiration, but in quiet assessment, as though he were measuring something that couldn't be seen. When they'd finished, he rose. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you the ranch." Outside, the air was sharp and clean, smelling faintly of pine and horses. Luke led her across the yard, pointing out the corral, the chicken coop, and the wide pasture that stretched toward the foothills. 200 acres, he said, every fence post and gate. I set myself. After the war, I needed something to build instead of destroy. His voice stayed even, but Clara heard the weight beneath it, the kind of pain that didn't fade, only learned to sit quietly in a man's bones. "I understand that," she said softly. He looked at her, one brow lifting. "Do you?" Clara met his eyes. "My father fought to keep our land from failing. I learned that building something worth keeping means losing sleep, blood, and pride along the way." For a moment, a trace of respect flickered across Luke's face. Then he spoke, plain and steady. "I need a wife," he said, "not an ornament or a social prize. A partner, someone who won't run when things turn hard." Clara took a breath. "I know about hard things, Mr. Carver. I know what it's like to be overlooked, to be the one left behind. I don't need fancy clothes or big gatherings. I just want a place where I can belong." Luke said nothing for several heartbeats. His gray eyes softened, just barely, and then he turned toward the horizon, where the land rolled out like a sea of gold. "We'll see," he said quietly. They walked back toward the house, the wind stirring dust around their boots. Clara glanced at him once, catching the faraway look in his eyes, the look of a man who had lost too much and built a wall around what remained. She wondered if any woman had ever managed to climb that wall, or if it was even meant to be climbed. Later, as she cleaned up the kitchen, she thought of Lila, of her sister's easy beauty and the way people bent toward her like flowers to sunlight. But here, under the open Montana sky, Clara felt something strange stirring inside her. Not hope, not yet, but the faint sense that maybe her story was not yet written for by anyone else. When the sun dipped behind the hills, she stood at the window, watching Luke cross the yard toward the barn, his figure cut sharp against the light. She had told him the truth, and he hadn't turned her away. Whatever happened next, it would be by choice, not deceit. And for the first time in her life, that felt like freedom. Luke's words lingered in the morning air. Someone who can face hard seasons without running. Clara met his steady gaze. "I know about hard seasons, Mr. Carver. I know what it means to be unseen, to be the one left standing behind. I don't need silks or fine furniture. I just want a place that feels like mine." Something flickered in his gray eyes, a brief light that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Before either could speak again,
It's been a long
the
journey.
rhythmic thud of hooves broke the stillness.
But we made it.
A young man rode into view, the sun glinting off his sandy hair. His grin was quick and easy, the kind that made people feel at home before he ever said a word. He swung down from his horse and tipped his hat. "Morning, Luke. Morning. Miss, name's Mason Hale. Pleased to meet you." Luke nodded. "Miss Whitlow," he introduced curtly. Mason's smile deepened as he looked at her. "Welcome to Montana territory. Miss Whitlow, Luke here's a lucky man." Heat rushed to Clara's face at the open admiration in his tone. She couldn't remember the last time a man had looked at her as if she were worth noticing. Luke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his expression unreadable. Mason turned back to him. "Fences are down again in the north pasture. Those Langley steers broke through. Luke muttered something
It's been
under
a
his
long
breath,
journey.
the muscle in his cheek ticking.
But we made it.
We'll go
together.
fix it. I'll be back by midday. He gave Clara a quick glance, neither cold nor warm. When the two men rode off, dust trailing behind them, Clara stood alone in the yard. Her pulse hadn't settled. Mason's grin had left her flustered. But it wasn't his charm that stayed with her. It was the way Luke had noticed it. The faint tightening of his jaw, the watchful silence. Pushing the thought aside, she turned toward the house. Work steadied her hands. When her heart could not, she opened the windows, letting in the crisp mountain air, then beat the parlor rug until dust motes spun like tiny stars in the light. By the time Luke returned, the house felt brighter, the stillness less lonely. Near sunset, another wagon creaked up the road. A stout woman climbed down, gray streaking her hair and sharp humor sparking in her eyes. "Beatrice Hargrove," she announced, "your nearest neighbor, though that's a good 5 miles away. I thought I'd see if Luke Carver finally got himself a wife." Clara smiled faintly. "Not quite yet. It's complicated." Bea looked her over for a long moment before nodding. "Well, honey, everything about Luke Carver is complicated. But I'll tell you, this pretty girls don't last a week out here. What you've got, I can see it plain as day. That's staying power." The older woman's words warmed Clara more than she cared to admit. For the first time since arriving, someone saw her not for what she lacked, but for what she was made of. When Luke rode in near dark, his shirt damp with sweat and the day's dust on his hat, he found Clara in the garden, sleeves rolled, coaxing green from the dry soil. Without a word,
I cannot stay
he
here
took
any
the bucket
longer.
from her
Vanessa,
hands and began
But where will
watering
you
beside
go?
her.
It is not safe
They
out
worked
there.
in silence as the sky blazed pink and gold over the mountains. Later that evening, Mason arrived again, laughing as he swung down from his horse. "Hope I'm not interrupting. Thought I'd bring some coffee beans. Bea said you might be running low." At supper, Mason filled the table with stories, the kind of light-hearted chatter that seemed to make even the lamplight glow warmer. He praised Clara's stew, complimented the jar of wildflowers she'd set at the table's center, and asked easy questions that made her laugh. Luke, by contrast, grew quieter, his gray eyes moving between Mason's grin and Clara's flushed cheeks. When the meal ended and Mason finally took his leave, Luke lingered by the doorway. His shadow stretched across the floor, his silhouette framed by the lamplight. "This house," he said in a low, rough voice, "already feels different with you in it. One day, and it feels alive." Clara's breath caught. She searched for words, but all she could manage was, "Houses need tending, like gardens." "Yes," he replied quietly, "they do." The silence between them wasn't empty. It carried something unspoken, something growing just beneath the surface. The days slid into weeks. The rhythm of ranch life shaped itself around them like a slow, unhurried dance. Clara rose with the dawn, baking bread, mending shirts, scrubbing floors until the board shone. She tended the small garden behind the house and learned the creak of every hinge, the rhythm of every wind that passed across the land. Luke worked from sunrise to sundown, driving cattle, repairing fences, cutting hay before the weather turned. At first, they moved like strangers, orbiting the same world. But gradually, their steps began to find a shared rhythm. One evening, as Clara cleaned the parlor, she tugged at a stubborn drawer in Luke's desk. It jerked open suddenly, sending a small bundle of papers tied with string tumbling to the floor. She bent to gather them, meaning only to put them back, but a familiar name caught her eye. Lila. Her chest tightened. She hesitated, then read the first line. Dear Miss Whitlow, I am not good with words. The war took that from me, but I will try to be honest. The handwriting was unmistakably Luke's, rough, uneven, yet painfully sincere. These weren't the letters Lila had received. These were drafts, unsent and unpolished. She read on, her pulse quickening. He had written of long winters, of nights haunted by the past, of land that demanded everything and gave back only what a man could earn through toil and pain. Between the lines, though, there was tenderness, a yearning for a kindred soul, for quiet companionship, for someone to understand. This was not the gruff stoic rancher Lila had mocked in her letters home. This was a man who bared his heart to paper because it was safer than saying the words aloud. What are you doing?
I have to go.
Luke's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, eyes shadowed, expression unreadable. Clara froze, the pages trembling in her hands. I found them when the drawer stuck. I shouldn't have read them. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took the papers from her, though his grip wasn't harsh. For a long moment he only stared at them, his face softened by something she couldn't name. These were drafts, he said finally, voice low. I never sent them. I thought I sounded a fool. You didn't, she whispered. You sounded honest. For a moment that stretched long between them, their eyes held. Then Luke drew in a slow breath, resolve flickering across his face. Come with me, he said. I'll show you what I was writing about. That evening, as the last light bled across the horizon, Luke saddled 2 horses. The air was cool and sharp with the scent of pine. Clara followed him along a winding trail that climbed steadily into the hills. The sound of crickets filled the dusk, mingling with the steady clop of hooves. When they reached the ridge, the world unfolded beneath them. The valley spread wide and golden, the ranch lying small below, and beyond it the mountains rose in dark, jagged lines. The setting sun painted everything in shades of fire red, amber, and deep violet. Clara drew in a breath. It's beautiful, she whispered. Luke's voice was quiet, almost reverent. This place kept me alive during the war. I told myself if I ever made it back, I'd build here. I'd share it with someone who could understand. He turned toward her, his face caught in the dying light. Half shadow, half flame. Your sister never would have. But you. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. The wind stirred a loose strand of her hair, and for a moment, neither of them looked away. I can't be Lila, she said softly. I can only be myself. Luke's gray eyes softened, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. That's the only thing I want. They stood together as the sun slipped behind the mountains, the sky fading into night. For the first time since she'd arrived, Clara felt something stir between them that had nothing to do with duty, or family, or expectation. It was quiet and steady, like the heartbeat of the land itself, something real, something alive. At the top of the ridge, the whole world unfolded around them. The valley stretched wide and golden in the fading light, the ranch lying small and distant below. Beyond that, the mountains lifted against the horizon, their peaks painted in fire and shadow as the sun sank low. Clara could only breathe out a quiet sound of awe. Luke's voice came soft beside her. This place kept me alive during the war. I used to dream about it, imagined a home here, something solid I could build with my own hands. Told myself if I made it back, I'd share it with someone who understood what it cost to keep going. He turned toward her then, his face carved by light and dusk, the lines of it weathered but strong. Your sister never would have understood that, he said quietly. But you. Her heart thudded in her chest, every beat echoing in her ears. She wanted to tell him she already felt it too, that strange sense of belonging, of peace, but the words tangled somewhere deep in her throat. Luke's next words came low and certain. I think I was writing to the wrong sister all along. The air seemed to still around them. Clara swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. I can't be Lila, she whispered. I can only be myself. His gaze softened. All the guarded edges gone. That's the only person I ever wanted. 2 days later, the weather broke. The sky turned the color of slate, and the wind rose hard from the mountains. By afternoon, the storm had rolled in like a freight train, lightning cracking, rain pounding against the earth in wild sheets. Luke was already saddling his horse when Mason Hale galloped into the yard, shouting over the roar of thunder. Fences down on the east side. Langley's cattle broke through. Before Luke could speak, Clara had her boots on and her shawl tied tight. Stay in the house, he barked, but she was already following him into the storm. The rain stung her face like thrown gravel as they reached the creek, now swollen into a raging brown current. Through the downpour, they spotted a calf pinned against a fallen log, its cries nearly drowned by the rush of water. Luke plunged in without hesitation, fighting the pull of the current as he tried to free the animal. The water rose to his waist, tugging at his legs. Clara's breath caught as she watched him struggle, his strength pitted against the flood. When the log shifted and Luke stumbled, instinct overrode fear. Clara splashed in after him, gripping a tree root to steady herself.
But we made it.
Clara,
together.
Get back, he shouted over the roar. No, she cried, voice breaking through the storm. We do this together side by side. They pushed and pulled, fighting against the river until, at last, the calf broke free and scrambled toward the bank. But in that same moment, the log gave way again, slamming into Luke's legs and dragging him under. Luke, without thinking. Clara lunged forward, her fingers locking onto his shirt just as he disappeared beneath the surface. Mason reached from the other side, and together they hauled him up, gasping and heavy, onto the muddy bank. By the time they made it back to the house, the storm was still howling. Luke sat wrapped in a blanket by the fire, his gray eyes locked on her. Water dripped from his hair, his face pale with exhaustion. That current could have taken you, he rasped, voice rough from cold and fear. Clara knelt beside him, wringing the rain from her braid. It could have taken you, she shot back. Did you really think I'd just stand by? Most women would have, Luke thought, though he didn't say it. Instead, he reached out, his hand rough and warm against hers. You're not most women. For a moment, the only sound was the storm outside and the faint crackle of fire. Then Luke spoke again, softer this time. When I saw you running down that bank, stubborn as ever, I knew. I don't want Lila. I don't want some pretty lie. I want you. You're the one I'd choose every time. Tears blurred her eyes, but she smiled through them. Then choose me, Luke Carver. Not out of duty, out of truth. I already have, he said.
I cannot stay here any longer.
At last. The
Where will
following
you
week,
go?
when
It
the
is not
skies
safe out
cleared
there.
and the hills shone bright again, they were married quietly beneath the wooden rafters of the small white church outside Bozeman. Beatrice Hargrove and Mason Hale stood as their witnesses, wildflowers arranged in mason jars brightening the humble space. Clara wore her best gray dress, her hair pinned with a small silver comb Bea had lent her. Luke wore his good black hat, his scarred hand steady as he took hers. When the preacher asked for his vow, Luke's voice rang clear and sure. "Forever," he said simply, and Clara knew he meant it with every beat of his heart. That summer, the dust settled long enough for the land to bloom again. Then one afternoon, a carriage rolled up the lane sleek, polished, and far too fine for this corner of Montana. Lila stepped out, draped in silk and lace, her smile sharp as glass. She swept into the house without waiting for invitation, her voice sugar sweet. "Well, sister, you certainly made yourself comfortable." Clara met her gaze evenly. "I've found where I belong." Lila's eyes darted toward Luke, who stood behind Clara, arms folded. "You don't have to pretend." "Luke," she said softly, "you were promised me." Luke's voice came low, steady as a storm breaking. "No, I was promised a lie. What I have now is real." He stepped closer to Clara, his hand finding hers. "Clara is my choice, my only choice." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Lila's expression faltered, her beauty dimming under the weight of truth she couldn't twist. Without another word, she turned and left, her carriage wheels carving deep ruts into the wet earth. Clara stood at the doorway watching her go, not with anger, but with calm certainty. When the dust settled, she turned to Luke. "I wouldn't trade places with her for all the silk dresses in the world." He smiled, the kind of quiet smile that said more than words ever could. "And I wouldn't trade you for all the beauty in it." The months that followed were not easy ones. Drought came, turning fields to dust and testing their resolve. They patched fences, hauled water, and worked side by side from dawn until long after the stars rose. Gossip drifted from town, whispers about the plain woman who'd stolen the rancher's heart. But Luke met every word with unflinching loyalty. Each hardship only forged them stronger. The laughter that once came rarely began to fill their days again, woven between work and quiet evenings on the porch. The ranch endured. So did they. One night, as they sat side by side, watching the stars spill across the endless Montana sky, Luke took her hand. His thumb brushed over her wedding band, worn but shining in the lamplight that drifted from the window. "You were never second choice," he said softly. "You were destiny." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. "Forever," she whispered. Above them, the wind moved through the tall
Are you sure
grass,
about this?
carrying the scent of pine and rain,
I have to go.
of earth and promise. And under that vast Montana sky, they knew that no matter what storms came their way, they had already won the truest prize, the choice to walk through this life together, hand in hand, never again second best. At its heart, she was sent. Instead of her sister is not just a story about love, it's about self-worth, courage, and the quiet dignity of those who keep going even when the world overlooks them. For those of us who've seen the seasons turn many times, Clara's journey reminds us that the deepest love is not found in youth, beauty, or luck, but in steadfast hearts that endure. She teaches us that honesty, kindness, and faith can rebuild what pain once destroyed. When life gives us hard choices, when we must choose between pride and peace, or between duty and truth, it is often the humblest path that leads to grace. Clara's story tells every soul, young or old, that it is never too late to be chosen, to be seen, and to begin again. So as we grow older, may we remember storms may test us, but they also reveal who we really are. And sometimes, what seems like second best was destiny all along. Thank you, ours, dear friends, for sharing this journey with us through the wild heart of the frontier. If Claire and Luke's story touched you, if it reminded you of lost loves, quiet strength, or second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Frontier Hearts. Your support keeps these timeless stories alive and helps us bring more tales of courage, hope, and love from the American West straight to your heart. Until next time, keep your spirit wild and your heart open.